Okay. Thank you, Martin. I'm terrible with notes, so I'm going to put those down, and hopefully you won't forget anything else important. So those of you who joined us last year know that I never resist an opportunity to tell a personal story or share a personal learning, just in case you might take something from it. So if you don't mind, I'm going to start by pouring my heart out. So I met my husband in Oxford at a disco. I meant it. I'm going to be pouring my heart out. A bot, for those of you from Oxford. And I remember it was quite well lit. In Oxford Bops, I don't know if they still do this. They don't actually introduce disco lights. And I could see him watching me for that reason. And I remember the song playing. It was "I've Got a Feeling" by Black Eyed Peas. So eventually he started coming over, sort of very cool, and I pretended I couldn't see him. And then he said, "If I had any rhythm, I'd ask you to dance." So I'm not going to tell you what I said. I'd like to know what you would have done. It is relevant, I promise. I'm not just questioning my marriage and my life choices. But if you could take your phone out and head over to slido.com. This is also partly to test the polling software that we're going to be using today. And you should be able to just put the code that's at the bottom of the page. I'll get out of your way. Wow. Whilst we do that, I'll share a bit more about my background. So I have a background in digital strategy, digital transformation, and I lead Sums's IT and digital transformation practice. So I've done this across a number of sectors, from financial services to manufacturing to government, and of course now in HE. So how are we doing? Aww. Mr. Dixon will be very, very pleased. So why am I telling you about this? Why am I shaming my husband in this way? It's because whatever else happens here today, I want you to try and remember one thing. So we're going to have a lot of very challenging discussions about the university of the future, from teaching and learning, technology, what happens next from for our values-based economy. But I want you to remember this. So Bernard, our CEO, hates a cheesy metaphor. So if you don't mind, I'm really going to lean into this one, Bernard. And I'm going to need your support so I don't get the sack. On the question of the full impact that emerging technology, AI, will have on our sector and others, nobody has all the answers right now. So, from your perspective, you might not have found your rhythm, but that's no excuse not to make your way to the dance floor. It's awful, I know, I'm definitely getting fired. But what do I mean by that? So I mean, whatever your capabilities, whatever your confidence with technology, the time to engage with emerging technologies is now. Okay. And we'll talk about what some of those technologies are. But I wonder, just from what you've heard, before I get into the detail, how many of you think, actually, it's all hype, to quote an IT director I was talking to just last week? Or how many of you think, actually, we're at the cusp of one of the biggest transformations in teaching and learning and HE professional services that we've ever seen? So back on Slido. Is it A, you think actually we are on the cusp of very significant transformation? On the fence? No, minimal impact, maybe some things might change, but broadly nothing will change. Or is it mostly hype? Do you actually think very little will change? Okay, hopefully everyone has voted. That is encouraging. I can see the dial still moving, but I think we get zero people think that it's mostly hype. I'm so excited about that. But my answer, and I want to talk to you, those of you who chose B, is B. But Lucy, how can you talk about the fact that actually we need to engage with all of these emerging technologies now, but in the same breath talk about the fact that actually not very much might happen, or we might not see such a big transformation? It's because we have a history, or we have prior in our sector, of not realizing the true potential of technologies. So I don't doubt the transformative potential of the technology that is available and is becoming available, and we'll talk about that. But historically, we have used this technology in a way that meant actually we've limited its potential. So another thing I want you to take from today is quite literally broaden your digital horizons. And because the reason I think that we haven't been able to take part, we haven't been able to realize the impact of these technologies, is because sometimes we're too busy watching the technology as a sector. So we lead with all of these cool, exciting tools and forget about the people behind it. So what's my evidence for this? So I'm going to take you back in history very briefly to the 2000s and 2010s and look at what we would have been saying about the university of the future then. So does anyone remember what the biggest technologies were in the 2000s, 2010s? I can hear some whispers. I picked a few, there were lots. So we were also having quite a similar discussion actually back then, but I've picked virtual learning environments. So they were around in the 2000s, 2010s, but they're sort of, experiencing a bit of a resurgence now post-COVID. Customer relationship management tools, or CRMs, and online platforms that allowed us to do things like launch online applications. So these are pretty much second nature now, but they were all quite new and exciting back in the 2000s and 2010s. And if we think about it, what did we do? So we used technology to do more of the same. So we made our inefficient processes faster. We just put a bigger engine in, right? We let the techies, and no offense techies, I'm one of you, but we let the techies bolt technology onto our inefficient processes without fixing the underlying practices. And as an aside, this is why I have a slight problem with sort of traditional delivery methods, project delivery methods, right? So you do your as-is and you do your to-be process mapping, and by definition, you're hyper-focused on how things are done today, right? Few changes, but broadly, you want to maintain the status quo. Whereas with newer approaches, the focus of as-is process mapping is to find out where your data is. And a few non-negotiables from a user perspective, but on the whole, everything else goes in the bin, right? Blank sheet of paper, start again. But I digress. So let's look at some of these technologies and what we would have been saying about the university of the future. So virtual learning environments. Back then, the promise was for interactive online learning hubs, right? Tools for student engagement, student collaboration, real-time feedback from academics and lecturers. But what happened? So broadly, we use these technologies as document repositories, right? We store lecture notes, maybe sometimes videos. Sometimes there's a few sort of basic forum discussions, but on the whole, we haven't changed the way that we teach. We didn't change the way that we teach to be able to really take advantage of the interactivity of these tools, which was the whole point. Customer relationship management tools, so the promise there was for holistic student lifecycle management, right, from prospect through to alumni. So being able to engage with students at various points, but collect all of this data in one place to enhance retention, student experience, propensity modeling, so the ability to predict who was struggling, who was going to drop out. But on the whole, we replicated existing marketing practices very successfully, I hasten to say, our marketing team. But on the whole, we are abandoning CRMs on day one. And for those institutions that are using them post day one, they're all in silos, right? There's usually multiple CRMs in universities that don't talk to each other. I had a really interesting conversation with a university a few weeks ago, and I was trying to figure out a way to help them bring their data together. And we were talking about insights and student insights. And one conversation was about, that's marketing's data. marketing will be very upset if we draw insights that are separate to them or try and pull that data in because they paid for it, right? So there's sort of a cultural resistance, I think, in our sector that we've got to look at. Otherwise, we won't be able to realize some of the newer technologies that are coming through. And online applications, so the University of the Future then promised seamless, personalized experiences, maybe combined with digital interviews, which to be fair we're doing more of now, portfolio submissions, but on the whole, we took the paper forms and put them online. So all of the back-end cumbersome processes weren't changed. So all the same approval processes, and it just meant that actually the potential for this technology, like the others, was really quite limited. And I'm seeing the same responses now, right? So what are the newer technologies? And I've picked a few that I've been having discussions with IT directors with across the sector, and these seem to be the ones that everyone is most excited about. So we'll go through each of them in turn, and then maybe look at what the potential is for us as a sector, the potential for change. And what I think the potential pitfalls are if we don't address some of the cultural process norms that we sometimes see in our institutions. So artificial intelligence, AI, has got to be at the top. Everyone's talking about ChatGPT. And in our sector, that has mostly been a discussion around chatbots, right? So for the University of the Future, the ability to offer 24/7 personalized support to students, transformative. Really taking the burden off of professional services in the first instance, but from a student perspective, being able to get support at any point, day or night. What I'm seeing is that a lot of institutions are taking static website summaries and making these chatbots basically FAQ answers. And the technology is capable of so much more than that. Right? We can think much, much bigger than that. We're having a conversation with Cypher, and I can see some of our partners here in the room. You can talk to them downstairs about how this technology is being deployed in other sectors. So rather than FAQ answering, actually we're talking about the smarter way of deploying this technology might be to question students, to get to the heart of their problems, challenge them on really what the root causes of their issues that a human can then respond to. Right? So you're not asking a machine to try and respond to sensitive student issues, but you're cutting away some of that, I guess, initial fact find in a way that is quite creative and asks questions that a human might not think of. So that's the potential, and I wonder why we're not pushing it to that stage as a sector. So virtual reality or augmented reality. So the promise there is to be able to do amazing things like, I almost said chat to Leonardo DiCaprio then, which you can sign me up to chat to Leonardo DiCaprio. Do exciting things like chat to Leonardo da Vinci, right? History students can have, combine AI and have those direct conversations. Wow. Or, have a medical student do open heart surgery on the very first day, right, in a virtual environment. But the institutions that are investing in this technology should be applauded, right? But they're investing in entry-level technology and then stopping. So they are taking students on virtual tours of museums, which they would have done in the traditional ways of teaching. But actually the technology is capable of so much more. And it requires the people who are doing the teaching, who are putting together the curriculums, to think much broader than what we've done in the past. And blockchain technology, so what is blockchain technology? So quite literally, think of a chain of digital blocks that each contain data. And those chains are securely linked. So you can think very similar to a series of safety deposit boxes, right? So the entry code to each of those boxes is linked so that if a thief tries to get into one, it disrupts the whole chain so that it's very obvious tampering has occurred. Very, very secure way of storing data. And it has the potential to transform credentialing. I mean, think about it. We're still dealing with paper degree certificates, right? Paper transcripts that you have to call universities up sometimes to to validate, and let's be honest, can be very easily forged. So after about 10 years, you can put whatever you want on your CV. No one really has time to check. And that's a risk, right, for our sector. It devalues what we're doing. But with blockchain technology, you have the ability to create universal, tamper-proof academic credentials. So you give the student a digital key, and they can give that key to other institutions, to employers, and they can access the real, authentic credential at the click of a button. And we don't have to maintain specialist hardware anymore to do the printing of our credentials. But again, where we're seeing universities invest in this technology, it's again entry-level technology that stops, quite short of the potential of the technology itself. So where universities are investing in it, mostly in the States, it's to create backup to traditional verification processes. So they are still handing out transcripts and degree certificates, but kind of keeping a safe version in the using blockchain technology, just in case anything ever gets lost. Right. So not really transforming from a student perspective their experience, and we now have to carry on bits of paper for the rest of our lives. And I get it. I think sometimes I sense a hesitation of emerging technology because it can be useful for good or evil. And I would love to have a conversation about that because I think there is a gray area in terms of what's good and what's evil. But I've made a list. So I've made a list of what I think the potential positive implications could be for our sector, for some of these technologies, as well as a list of things that keep me up at night. So, positive potentials. So I think user-first design and experiences is by far the biggest positive potential for our sector. So investing in emerging technologies usually means more user-friendly interfaces. So people can finally self-serve, right? So we've been chasing that as a sector for some time, but it's going to have to come with a change in culture. I sometimes have conversations with academics where I don't do admin. Admin is not my job, right? So it's going to need to come with a culture change, but actually on the whole, you can put the power back into the hands of the user, and you can have technology that adapts to their specific needs and preferences. And you sometimes hear artificial intelligence used in the same senses as hyper-personalization. And all that means is being able to bend processes, bend activities specifically to suit that particular user. So with AI, for example, there's a fantastic institution in the States, the Khan Academy. They've partnered with quite a few institutions to introduce AI into the classroom. So everybody's in the same room, they're all working towards the same goal. But AI means that they can, the student can ask an AI module specific questions that they are struggling with, or they can, ask for explanations, or, really delve into things that they find particularly interesting. But you're all working towards the same goal. So I wonder how ready we are in the UK for that kind of teaching. Value-add professional services. So again, the ability to remove repetitive tasks. So to be able to give people back time to be able to for more of those human interactions, right? And anything that you can repeat and that has a rule to it usually means that you can teach a machine to do it. So for those who were here last year, I spoke briefly about my last project in financial services, where we trained an AI model to recognize documents that people submitted for verification of their income, etc. So that saved thousands of man-hours and meant that actually the people involved in the process could get involved with helping people who didn't meet, the requirements for a mortgage, meet those requirements and give that person advice, because we weren't throwing all of the man hours at verifying documents, right? So there'll be similar processes in our sector that mean that actually we can take away those sort of non-value-add activities and improve the experiences for our staff and students. And data-driven decision-making, right? Analytics, big data, huge for our sector. We have so much data, so much good data. And if we could harness all of that and help with decision-making, curriculum decisions, that propensity modeling that we couldn't quite get to with CRM technology has the ability to transform the way that we operate and the way that we teach. And in terms of the risks, so security has got to be at the top, right? Very few people, I was going to say very few people that I know, but I don't know any bank robbers. So very few people are robbing banks anymore these days, right? If you want an equally lucrative, discrete profession, then cybercrime is probably the profession for you. Because it's transforming with emerging technology, right? And as a mild demonstration, I created my Bernard AI. This is our CEO. And she can talk, right? I had very good conversations about my promotion next year, Bernard. And it's terrifying for more reasons than one. And I had a very good conversation again with our security partner, our cybersecurity partner, a few weeks ago, where they called a finance director as her deputy, mimicking her voice, using a recording that they'd made from a Teams meeting, and she had no idea, right? The security landscape is about to drastically transform. And I felt like we were just getting our hands around it as a sector. I wonder how ready we are for the transformative potential of emerging technologies. Next one, very steep learning curve. So again, I've been struck by some work that I'm doing on digital roadmaps across a number of institutions, and I've been working with academics there who say sometimes the language and tone of digital transformation lacks empathy. So they feel that actually they have had very long, distinguished careers in academia, and now that the university has decided to turn to digital learning, they feel like they've been left behind, right? So accounting for that learning curve for your staff and your students, I think will be crucial in being able to take advantage of these technologies. And it will be a massive pitfall if you don't. And equity concerns, so this is one that I want to focus on briefly because it, I think, speaks to the heart of who we are as a sector and the potential impact of not taking equity concerns with emerging technology seriously. So I'll tell you another personal story and then I'll close, I promise. So fast forward about 4 years from that disco, and I was starting my first job. It was at a big tech consultancy in London, and they had implemented these facial recognition software, so we didn't have traditional passes, so you just sort of went up to it and it let you in. So I get there on my first day, and lo and behold, I need to stand aside with a group of 3 other ethnic minority new hires because the software couldn't recognize us, right? So facial recognition software has a lot of well-known troubles, but one of the biggest ones is that it really struggles to recognize darker skin tones. Another reason I'm not particularly excited about self-driving cars. But you know, it's to do with the design of the software. Absolutely, I'm not seeking to absolve the vendor. But also, I think someone somewhere in that business should have thought, how is this going to work for all of our people? Right? So the time to have that conversation is not when you have a potential PR disaster on your hands, and then suddenly it's not about the technology anymore. And I think equally, when the time to have that conversation is not when you have a bright ethnic minority graduate standing outside your door thinking, oh my God, how am I going to make it here if I can't even make it through the door, right? And then suddenly it's not about the technology anymore. And look, for what it's worth, it worked the other way around. So there was a super secret exec floor that you could only get to if you're one of the directors. And anytime I walked past, it would just open. The show of hands, how many people would have gone in? Yeah, I 100% went into the super secret exec floor. But But like I said, the equity concerns are real. There's a lot of them out there in terms of, training AI on historic data that is historically exclusive, right? So we need to be aware of these. And the people to have those conversations are in this room, right? It's not the tech boards, they're in this room. So ask the hard questions, right? If programs aren't truly transformative or bringing people with you, challenge, right? So I'm going to close now, but as I did say I would come back to this, and I hope it does stay. I hope my kind of potential sacking has been worth it, and that this sticks with you, because it really is about engaging, because the measure of success for most of the people in this room, bar a few IT directors, will not be how well you implemented this technology, right? It will be how well you adapted the culture of your teams and thought about your people as the technology was implemented.